Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, November 15th, 2017. Not exactly sure how to approach our show today, as we are, as I told you in the Morning Post, once again under the cloud of a mass shooting, but apparently it's a mass shooting that doesn't count. I don't know exactly why that would be the case, but maybe we've become numb to it. Maybe the number of people shot no longer registers with us. Like any other condition this way, we've just become accustomed to this sort of thing. There certainly have been mass shootings that are supposed to count as mass shootings where more people have been shot since Sutherland Springs, Texas, but we don't really register those things anymore. These are now run-of-the-mill street corner shootings, music venue shootings, domestic violence shootings that, take 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people with them and more or less pass without notice. But yesterday's involved an elementary school and several shooting sites. So this was a shooting spree on top of it all, but it didn't register. It didn't register with the President of the United States, who, upon returning from Asia, the very large country of Asia, which he thanked profusely in his tweets last night, tweeted out his hopes and prayers, thoughts and prayers, I guess, for Sutherland Springs, Texas. And we're still not entirely sure whether he didn't realize there was a shooting in California or thought he might cut and paste his thoughts and prayers from Sutherland Springs and edit it and remove Sutherland Springs, Texas, and put in California. In any case, it wasn't done correctly, and still not sure exactly what he thought he was tweeting his condolences about. We're just at that stage of the development of our history here in the United States of America, where we confuse mass shootings or forget about them, or are not really sure where it happened, but it was out there somewhere. The president is unfortunately back from sleepaway camp, and we have him back now. And the guy who complained, of course, I don't get to watch any television. You people who say I watch too much television, you're all wrong. I watch no television. Was tweeting about how he got stuck or was forced to watch television in the Philippines. I don't know how that happened exactly, but I guess he was looking for Fox News, and it's not on in the Philippines, and CNN was, and that's news, and that's what big boys watch on television when there's no cartoons, and all the cartoons are in Filipinish, and I don't understand it anyway. And I guess he got forced to watch it. And so this morning's tweets are mostly thanks to people who sent complimentary tweets about how awesome he is and thanking Asia. I thought that was interesting. It's 280 characters they now give you in Twitter, and he's thanking Asia because he was in several countries. And I can understand that, sort of. Even 140 characters. I think he can fit. Thank you so much to the wonderful people of Japan, China, the Philippines, everywhere he's been. And did we miss anything? South Korea, even in 140 characters, I think he can make it fit. 280 certainly, but thanks Asia, Bill in Portland, Maine, and a few others of you out there with good eyes, perhaps surmising that maybe he meant the 1980s band Asia, thanking them for their fantastic easy listening hits. I guess they now count as easy listening. I suppose they were really hardcore rock at the time. How do you classify Asia? I don't know. We'll probably discuss. That'll be Friday's show. We'll discuss all of that. Daily Co's Radio is alive now, as Bill reminds us in his morning tweet. Sometimes we get to him, sometimes we don't. Trump is back from Asia. Who knew it was such a big country? And Kagro X, hi, that's me, is back in his safe room. Still not really back in the safe room. Still down in the basement. Still working on all of the renovations. You'd think that there was some kind of enormous major change going on. It's one room we're working on. It's a lot. It's the bathroom. And, that means tearing everything down and putting it back together again from the ground up. But we're nearly there. And I think maybe the noisy stuff will stop for a while, and we'll get a chance to move back to our fabulous new Mac Mini that has been waiting patiently for us to return. The old laptop has been a serviceable replacement so far. Just a few hiccups here and there. And last night it decided it really, really, really couldn't stand waiting to not update to the new OS. So we got that running, and it didn't cause any problems yet, but it's still early in the show. Anyway, lots to get to today. Roy Moore still in the news. Cannot get rid of this guy. More stuff yesterday. Let's see. Sean Hannity is even thinking about abandoning ship on this one. He says he gave the judge, and I guess he's not a judge because he lost the seat. He likes to refer to himself that way, and lots of people like to call him Judge Moore, but he's not one. But he gave Roy Moore 24 hours from when, I don't know. Somebody's probably got a clock running. 24 hours to give a reasonable explanation. Whatever that's supposed to mean, or that's it. We're done with you. Basically, he's looking for a backdoor to escape from all this. I don't know if he's planning on replacing everybody's Keurig machines or what you're supposed to smash. If you get a decent explanation, I don't like 24-hour Sudafed. Is that what you take it outside and hit it with a hammer? I don't really know. But hopefully there's more destruction in Hannity and Hannity's fans' path, and we can figure out what they're supposed to do with it. Greg Dworkin is all ready to roll here. We'll see if the computer's ready to let him on. I hear you, Greg, so that's good. I got the spinning color wheel thing going, but I hear you.
Well,
how you doing?
That's a good sign.
Yeah, the color pinwheel thing is not, but I hear you. That's a good sign.
Okay, we did the echo thing. We took care of that.
Yeah. This computer doesn't have that problem. It's the other computer, the new one that's supposed to work really well, that refuses to acknowledge that I have clicked. I clicked off the check in the box.
Doesn't remember your changes.
Right. I don't know what you did yesterday. It's a new day, and you're getting an echo unless you click the box. All right. It's just working now. It's so good, you should hear it twice.
Right. So, house stuff always comes up when you try to do renovations. We live in a very modest 1960s style raised ranch here in Connecticut.
Ranch, great dressing.
We did one of those bathroom things, and the funny thing is none of the walls were straight.
Yeah, you find those things out.
Yeah, so we had to build fake walls on the inside that were straight in order to really be able to tile the walls.
Right.
And do the renovation. So these things happen.
Right. All this kind of stuff comes up, and this thing is in the wrong space. The electrical box is like a 1/4 inch shy of where we needed it to be. And
the other thing I found is when we renovated the garage, they didn't really use insulation. They just used rolled up newspapers. But the nice thing is that when you pull the newspapers out of the wall and start to read them, like the Yankees were really good in those days.
Right. Yeah. Well,
the box scores, because it was always the sports section, right? So it was always the box scores. Mantle had about 3 hits that day. It was great.
No coverage of John F. Kennedy's sexual harassment, though.
Well, that stuff didn't make the news until after he died.
I know. It's very weird.
So it is very weird. Now, there's a lot of stuff to talk about today, and certainly Roy Moore is a lot of it. But since you started with Hannity, I thought I'd mention a couple of things and then tell you why it's coordinated.
Okay.
So Chris Geithner notes the RNC finally ended its joint fundraising agreement with Roy Moore. Now, you may recall the Senate committee had done that earlier with Cory Gardner. Oh. But the Republican National Committee didn't do it until yesterday.
Okay. Well, why not squeeze in a few more dollars before finally making a decision?
But what's that all about? Well, there's this piece in the Daily Beast here, which is not on your list, but it is about to be, because as we talk about things, for those of you following at home, I just generally will send over the things I didn't remember to send David before so he could read along with us. And, I'm explaining it to you so he has a chance to open it up and see. It's from the Daily Beast, and it's by Lachlan Markay and Aswin Shubsang.
Yeah. Oh, boy, does Steve Bannon look good in this picture.
Yeah, he does. Steve Bannon and allies have second thoughts about Roy Moore, sources say.
Bedraggled. Okay.
Trump's former chief strategist, Steve Bannon, is keeping the door open to ditching Roy Moore as the sexual assault allegations continue to pile up. Now, that's important because, without that kind of backing, what's the point? So if you have Steve Bannon, who still talks to Trump, winding up saying to Hannity, get rid of the Volvo and smash a Keurig, and also smash Roy Moore, then that all of a sudden doesn't seem like such an odd thing that Hannity would say something like that.
Yeah, that's so he's getting his signals.
The funny thing is people say, well, it doesn't really matter what Republicans say in Washington. It's all about Alabama. And this is true. But the National Party is extremely fearful of being labeled as being the predator party or the pedophile party. Pedophile may be the right word, but pedophile is the word people use. And they don't want to have anything to do with that. It happened with Aiken. It happened with the woman who was running as a witch, Christine O'Donnell. I mean, they don't like these associations where whoever is running has to answer for that other guy that happens to be running in Alabama. Oh, I see you're running for an open seat in Tennessee here. How do you feel about that Alabama guy?
Yeah.
They hate that.
That's true.
They have no control over that. They have, and if that's what the race is about, they wind up losing points over it. So, they're obviously not concerned about their feelings. They're concerned about winning races. And they've come to the conclusion that it's worse for the Republicans if he wins than if he doesn't. And if Doug Jones wins, it's better for the Republicans because they'll just take that seat back in 2020 or whenever it's up.
That's what, yeah. I mean, I hope not, but that's what they think.
So this whole thing about what Bannon is saying and doing, has saliency because if you're seeing erosion publicly, there's more erosion behind the scenes. What do the polls say? Well, let's just, before we get to the polls, point out a very astute Cook Political Report who follows these things. Jennifer Duffy is their Senate specialist, says at the very least, that was not Cook. Cook says basically it's a toss-up. This race is a hot mess that's likely to get messier between now and December 12th. And the circumstances of a special election and the allegations against Moore combined to create as much uncertainty as we've seen in a Senate race since 2000, when Democratic Governor Mel Carnahan was on the ballot despite his death in a plane crash 3 weeks before the election. These things happen. You have to remember, American politics can be very bizarre. The contest moves to toss-up, as it is the only appropriate way of describing this uncertainty. Stay tuned. So even the polls showing Moore ahead have generally been cut in half since all of this happened.
Okay.
And you can look at it and say, well, he's only lost 3 or 4 points. But when you cut an 8-point lead to a 4-point lead, or a 22-point lead to an 11-point lead, depending upon the poll, or you have one that's is behind by 4 compared to his Democratic rival, and the ads against Moore and this stuff are only just starting, and we have a month to go, and you have everybody in Washington pulling out from supporting Moore, everybody. And you have, including Paul Ryan yesterday, and you have people in Alabama scratching their head and saying, I'm a little semi-uncomfortable about this. You have the makings for an upset. It would be an upset if the Democrat won, but it is possible.
Okay, I'm counting on it. Sent a little money.
Because, again, you have to remember the 14-year-old ick factor is enormous, and you can't just blow that away and say, oh well.
Yeah.
You get the big things, you get the little things, you get the bumper stickers, If Roy Moore is banned from the mall, he ought to be banned from the Senate.
Right.
Or as somebody wrote on Facebook from Alabama the other day, you got to hand it to Roy Moore. At least he drives slow through the school zones. I mean, if it's a running joke, then it's seeped into the consciousness, is what I'm trying to say.
That's right. That's what we usually measure that by late night comedy monologues.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, this works too.
Again, we'll just have to follow that. But everybody who said, oh, well, it's Alabama, he'll just win. That's not the story. I'm not guaranteeing that he's going to lose, but I'm saying is the story isn't even close to being finished yet, so it's way premature to decide how the race is going to go.
Yes. There's a lot that's premature about this story.
Mm. Yeah, including the ages of the people that he's after. I mean, it's kind of an open secret down there that this was true, so I don't think there's really any doubt about it being true. And that's why people like Mitch McConnell and even Paul Ryan say, basically, I believe the women. Of course, why don't they believe the women about Donald Trump? Well, because they don't want to.
Yeah, because he was open and bragging about it, and that's unusual for this sort of behavior, I guess. I don't know.
All right.
Although it didn't stop him.
So you want to talk about Trump, or you want to talk about the environment, political environment around this?
It's all the same.
It is, but which one do you want to do first?
Political environment. Let's pretend
Political
Trump's
environment.
still
Okay,
not
so
here.
Morning Digest at Daily Kos, the election digest, has new polls coming out. PPP did for a Patriot Majority USA, which is partisan.
Okay.
But it's a batch of House polls. And let me just give you an idea. In certain cases, you know who the Democrat is.
Yes.
In other cases, a lot of these cases, the 3 or 4 good candidates. So rather than pick each one of them, because it's expensive, every question you ask costs you something, they just asked it against generic Dem. So if you had a California 25 against Steve Knight, for example, and you had 2 or 3 people who could be the candidate, then they just said generic Dem versus Steve Knight.
Who is a generic R, but okay.
Right? So California 25, the Democrats, let me just read you the margin without even reading the districts.
Okay.
Let me just lead you the margins, and you'll get an idea what's going on here. A plus is the Democrat is ahead. A minus is the Republican is ahead.
Okay.
Okay? Plus 12, plus 10, plus 14, plus 10, minus 1, plus 4, plus 9, plus 5, plus 1, plus 2, plus 6, plus 6, plus 10, plus 5, minus 7. That minus 7 is Iron Stash Randy Bryce against Paul Ryan in Wisconsin. But
That's
all of these are Republican districts. These are Republican, for the most part, Republican incumbents. There's one generic Dem versus generic GOP in New Jersey, which is a plus 5 for the Democrat. But right now, these are all Republican-held seats.
Okay.
So 13 of the 15 show a Democratic lead. Wait. There's more. There's a couple of polls out that came out yesterday, one from Marist and one from Quinnipiac, and they were enormous leads for the generic Dem in the House race. For example, Amy Walter from Cook Political says the D's probably need plus 7 or plus 8 for a real shot at the House,
Right.
plus 10 to feel confident.
Yeah.
All right, this was a plus 15.
Oh, well, there's no chance we'll feel confident, but okay.
Right?
That's
If
good.
the 2018 election for Congress were held today, the 2018 were held today, which party's candidate were you more likely to vote for in your district? 51% Democrat, 36% Republican. And this is true not just for the House, but looking toward 2020, people are starting to poll now. And Steve Kornacki has some stuff from Political Morning Consult. If the 2020 matchup was, and just picks a couple, Joe Biden versus Trump, Biden is 46, Trump 35. But more importantly, if a generic Dem runs, it's 48 to 34. Generic Dem actually polls better than Biden.
Okay. I could see that.
But again, these if the way he's going, all you Democrats have to understand Trump is likely to get reelected. That is such BS. There is no data to suggest that he's likely to be elected, and every bit of data point saying he's going to get smashed. And in fact, Carl Ludsdorf, who's a conservative, writes in the Dallas Morning News this morning, his headline, I love the headline, job approval ratings show Trump's election was a fluke.
Yeah.
Might have been a Russian-run fluke, but it was a fluke.
Yeah.
And basically makes the point that people who voted for Trump really didn't like him. They just didn't like Clinton more for whatever reason. He doesn't go into that. Could have been because she was a woman. It could have been because she was a Democrat. It could have been because it was Hillary Clinton and she wasn't that good a campaigner. It could have been for a number of reasons. But negative attitudes toward Hillary Clinton, he says, prompted crucial swing voters in those states to take a chance on an opponent about whom they had grave doubts. His full sentence. An inept Democratic campaign and negative attitudes toward Hillary Clinton prompted crucial swing voters to vote for a guy who they didn't like. A year later, those doubts appear to have been confirmed. And then he goes over his terrible job approval ratings, along with Steve Kornacki's note about how the poll looks like for 2020. Trump is not a popular president. The fact that his numbers are basically in the garbage is not a fluke. It's where he is. He's not going up. There will be no pivot. He is doing terribly in his job, and he's also doing terribly in his job approval. And none of that is coincidental. It's all of a piece. So that's the background. And then you have all these elections. Virginia, like in your state, which you know well, it still looks like it's going to be 50-50 in the House of Delegates. I'm not sure that last election was actually decided.
Yeah.
But again, it's down from 66. So even if it's 51-49 Republican, that's still an incredible change.
Yes.
Oklahoma just had a special election yesterday in a state senator district, which was a plus 40 Trump area.
Yeah.
And the Democrat won by 32 votes.
Okay, good. So get out and vote. As a good
31
reminder,
votes. I shouldn't exaggerate. It was 31 votes.
You
22-34 to
lying libs,
22-03. You know, oh, you exaggerated. Now you don't know what you're talking about. Get off the air.
said magazine.
Right. But, you know, it just gives you an idea of the environment here. So, and I, again, mention all of this because I still see things like, well, Trump can do everything and he doesn't have political consequences. He could do whatever he wants. These are all political consequences of Trump being Trump.
Mm-hmm.
The Republican Party is in terrible shape. The generic ballot, plus 15. I mean, these are incredible numbers. And then, you know, if he's looking at his own job approval, they're awful. And if you're looking for reelect, he's getting smashed by 15, 12, you know, points. 18 points, depending upon the poll. You know, of course there are political consequences to this. And so he doesn't have the ability to direct things the way he wishes. He does, as president, because presidents are incredibly powerful, have the ability to do things, for example, to appoint incompetent judges and, you know, screw up the system. He can appoint people like Betsy DeVos or Rick Perry or you know, Tillerson or people to various departments and ruin them. I mean, he's certainly got the potential to break things.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, from a political perspective, Trump is doing terribly and he's an incredibly weak president.
Yes, good. Someone should tell him. It's very hard to get that through to him.
Yeah, well, he doesn't understand, but you don't expect him to understand anything. Things have to be explained to him.
Yes.
So, you know, there's all of that. The new tax
thing
bill
right
is moving along. They've decided to include getting rid of the individual mandate in the Senate side because you have to pay for it. John Weaver this morning, who is John Kasich's old whisperer, his political advisor.
Oh, okay.
A tax reform bill which raises taxes on the middle class, strips millions of families of their health care, rewards the top 1%, and balloons the deficit is the final political nail in the coffin for the GOP, is how he writes it.
Well, I hope we can find some more nails because it's really important to keep them in there.
It is, especially when you're doing renovations of your party. And you find out none of the walls are straight. So, you know, the point is that he's obviously very optimistic about how well this is going to be received.
Yes.
And there's some ugly stuff that's going to happen. Of course, the Senate says, well, to make up for the individual mandate, we'll pass Alexander Murray, which is the fix for the Affordable Care Act. The Democrats say, wait a minute, if you're passing Alexander Murray in order to pass this ridiculous tax bill that's going to screw the middle class, we're not voting for Alexander Murray. And that has to pass by 60. So if the Democrats withdraw support for Alexander Murray, it doesn't pass. So Republicans can't use that as a, well, don't worry, we'll fix it here, because that's not going to happen. The Democrats will not allow the Republicans to have that kind of cover. Interestingly, in the House says, well, that's a stupid idea anyway, because even if you passed it, we don't want to have any part of Alexander Murray. So no.
Okay.
That's part of any deal that we will go along with.
Well,
it gives you an idea of the kinds of problems the Republicans are going to have because they're sounding confident. The House vote may even be as soon as today, and it may well pass, but that's never the point. The point is what happens in the Senate. And the Senate's a hot mess.
Yeah, that's the point to the rest of us. I assume Donald Trump will have a party if it passes in the House.
Yeah, and they'll claim they're having great momentum and stuff. And just like the health care bill, that's you know, you've got a captive audience there who really don't have any choice. Republicans have to vote for this because they have nothing else. They've seen those numbers, though, about the generic ballots. They well know what that means. Harry Anthony has a nice piece saying that if you look at the generic ballot a year before the election, it's pretty predictive.
Oh.
And so they have a pretty good idea. They're getting their head handed to them, and they feel like they have to do something, anything, in order to make the claim that they're doing something.
Yes, they do feel that way.
This thing that they're doing, people don't like.
They don't like.
So they're kind of, caught in a double bind there.
Yeah. One, I guess, quick note. Yeah. I mean, not only do they know that people don't like it, but they don't like it themselves. Apparently, I guess this bill helps them. Now, they've broken the record for a single session for the number of closed rules for the bills they're considering. That would be a rule that allows 0 amendments. And that's a pretty good sign that they can't afford to offer any amendments because they'll lose control and they have no idea where their conference will go or what'll happen to the bill. So
this is on the House side?
Yeah. All the calls for regular order and a return to regular order, they now have broken the rules for the opposite of regular order, 0 amendments allowed. Pretty good. It's a good sign that the Republicans hate the bill as much as anybody.
Yeah. Again, they're pretty confident it'll pass, though, regardless, because they'll do
yes.
their arm twisting and such. But again, the game's going to be on the Senate side.
Right. Because they're looking forward to having a party for the passage, and maybe it's failure in the Senate. They might actually want that.
Mm. So you have all of that background, and it actually is looking, the elections are looking pretty good for the Democrats. Mm-hmm. But life in the United States is looking pretty bad for its citizens if any of this stuff actually passes.
Yeah, well, I guess they may actually just be crossing their fingers and saying, I get to say we did something, but all of the terrible results aren't visited upon my constituents or anyone else, so we escape with our lives in that sense. That might be their play.
When we get back, we'll do a little bit of trivia.
Okay. It's a whole lot of trivia every day. But okay. Yeah, we'll be working on that. We'll be back then after a short break for no particular reason except for us to catch our breaths and remain in practice for the day when another commercial radio station picks us up. Okay, we'll be back in 2 minutes right after this break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're just waiting for our music to wind its way down, discussing what other fun and engaging content Greg has found along the way. There's some weird stuff out there. I don't know if you have more actual, serious stuff to concentrate on, but that was pretty seriously weird, what you were telling me about.
Yeah. This is from a Roy Moore speech last night. He was at a revival tent kind of meeting.
That's awesome.
So there were lots about God. That's fine. That's, not unexpected given where he was.
Sure.
But he included this line that Joy picked up on. They started to create new rights in 1965, and today we've got a problem.
Oh, no,
and
rights.
It sort of kind of reminds you of Trent Lott. It would have been a good thing if Strom Thurmond would have won, that kind of thing. Yeah. At least that's how she took it. She said, what new rights in 1965 might Roy Moore have been referring to? The polite Alabama society opposed, I wonder. And, of course, she's referring to the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Yes, I would assume so, unless he thought maybe civil rights act
No,
was
but actually, this is where the trivia comes in.
Yeah, okay.
Kevin Cruz says, several took this as a reference to the Voting Rights Act, but I think, no, it's Griswold.
Oh, maybe.
Roy Moore was mourning the end of school prayer and said they started creating new rights in 65, and the historian Kevin Cruz says it's not a household name for many Americans, but Griswold v. Connecticut, 1965 has long loomed large for the religious right because it serves as the key legal foundation for Roe v. Wade in 73.
True.
The Griswold case revolved around an ancient Connecticut law that banned the sale of contraceptives. In writing the decision, Justice Douglas wanted to strike down the law on the grounds that it violated the right of privacy.
Yes.
Problem, however, is that strictly speaking, no such right existed in the Constitution.
Well, it was privately added to the Constitution.
But Douglas said an assumption that there is really a right to privacy could be found throughout the Bill of Rights. Beyond the strict letter of these amendments, Douglas argued, the court could see the right to privacy in the emanations from those amendments, the first guaranteed freedom of association, the third command of one's home, the fifth protection from self-incrimination, etc. Douglas likened the Bill of Rights, I miss Douglas. Douglas likened the Bill of Rights to an umbrella that casts an even bigger shadow of protections and located the right to privacy in that shadow as a penumbral right.
Yes. Good old penumbras.
Right? So yes, the Supreme Court did in one sense invent a new right in 1965.
Yes, although honestly, constitutional rights are like really great things and most people love them, but I guess, I don't know, somehow the constitutional right hates constitutional rights.
So, and he finishes, importantly, that right to privacy then became a key foundation in later cases regarding sexual activity, and most notably for the religious right, the right to abortion as laid out in Roe v. Wade 1973. Mike Sachs, a lawyer, adds, to tag along, Douglas's opinion was a tortured attempt to avoid relying on the same part of the Constitution the old conservative judicial activists 30 years ago had relied upon. Harlan and White were honest in concurrence, black, Douglas, usual partner, in dissent. Something I've always found fascinating is how White concurred in Griswold but dissented in Roe, and Stewart dissented in Griswold but joined Roe. Case-by-case prudence in one, fealty to precedent in another. What a foreign concept.
Yeah, well, it's a weird one.
But Griswold's real is the last one. But
Okay.
Griswold's real artifact is Goldberg's Ninth Amendment concurrence, joined by Warren and Brennan, points to what might have been for liberals had LBJ not convinced Goldberg to leave the court to make room for Fortas, whose subsequent failed chief nomination killed the Warren court for good.
Oh, okay.
All history, and how things
That's the
change.
interesting part of it. Yeah.
But an interesting reference, and, probably right, given the context that he was talking about school prayer, he probably was talking about Griswold.
That part, yeah, may be right. Of course, the part that's wrong is, and it's not that Cruz is wrong here, but rather that Moore is wrong here, and Armando notes it. It is a fairly serious misunderstanding of the writing to find from that a new right was created. The whole point of the writing was that the right existed all along and was being properly illustrated in this context for the first time.
I like that. But again, I said this was trivia, and most of you have never heard of Griswold.
Not even Clark Griswold.
Or Connecticut, for that matter. So I thought it was a good idea to bring up Connecticut and explain
Right.
it. It's a state, it's over in the Northeast. And by the way, it had this Griswold thing, and so you should know about it.
Okay. Well, excellent. That is true. And, Armando continues with commentary, which is good commentary and good legal commentary. If you're looking for the creation of new rights, look to the Heller case, which created new rights in the
He
Second
just said
Amendment.
that to get my teeth,
That is-
grinding.
Right, that's true. But right, so there we have that correction for us.
I mean, I'm not
Griswold-
correct. It's just
Yes.
Heller was so misguided and has screwed us since. So, just
well, that's true. But Griswold, that's his point. No new rights created, simply a clearer explication of already existing rights and existing precedent. Everyone has a different view.
One can, I
ours
think,
is right.
very properly defend, what happened there. But
Yes.
the evolution of the court and the fact that decision did happen and the fact that the religious right
They
really
do.
does
Oh yeah, no doubt
hate
about
it.
that.
That's all true.
That sticks in their craw. They're dumb, but it does stick in their dumb craws for whatever reason.
So there's that. Other things of interest. There's always stuff of interest in the news. There's just so much that happens every day. I have to go back to this piece from. This is all in the Pundit Roundup here. Brendan Nyhan wrote this back in October. It's a September-October issue, so I don't know exactly when he wrote it.
August.
But it's about Moores, not Roy Moore, but norms. It's about not Norm Ornstein,
Norm
but just
Moore.
like regular norms.
Okay.
And he says one of the crucial lessons of the past year, it turns out, is just how much of American politics is governed not by written law, but by norms like these. You can't write a law for everything. And that's why the Constitution has to be interpreted. That's why it's a living document. Even us non-lawyers understand that. You just have to do it logically and make a case. For instance, the president isn't required to divest himself of his businesses, but previous occupants of the White House have followed this tradition. Carter even put his peanut farm in a blind trust to avoid conflicts of interest. By contrast, Trump handed the reins to his sons, maintaining the rights to directly extract profits from the trust that controls his business empire. It's not illegal, but before this year, it was a line no modern president had crossed, just like not turning over his taxes right before this huge tax bill. Which, by the way, everybody in the public, according to the polls, thinks Trump's going to benefit, and they themselves will not.
Right.
Social scientists have long understood the importance of norms, the unwritten rules and conventions that shape political behavior, but our political system has largely taken them for granted. As a result, we have been slow to recognize how vulnerable these informal constraints on power are to someone who refuses to follow rules that everybody else respects. Trump's assault on norms started during the campaign when he encouraged violence among his supporters, attacked the ethnicity of a federal judge, and called, it's a double norm violation there, right? Because you're not supposed to attack ethnicity and you're not supposed to attack a federal judge. Now he's attacking CNN and, doing First Amendment stuff, and called for the imprisonment of his opponent. And by the way, that's especially relevant now. We'll talk about that a little bit with Jeff Sessions appearing before Congress. Once he was elected, many observers assumed the pattern would cease. Surely there are constraints on this kind of behavior from the president. But as it turns out, months later, no, it hasn't stopped at all. And that's why norms are so important. Shared values. That's what we have when we say that it's not okay to go chase after 14-year-olds. And that's why I think Roy Moore is in trouble in Alabama, not because of his views on Griswold.
Okay. Well, yeah, I doubt very much whether it's the views on Griswold that are undoing him.
Anyway, so you have all of that. And, we have to mention that Jeff Sessions was appearing in front of congressional committees yesterday.
Yes.
And what was interesting is the person who was pressing him about how come you're not going after Hillary. Yeah. Again, this was written in September, October, that thing by Brendan Nyhan. And it's relevant today. It came up yesterday.
Yes, they did not drop that.
They didn't drop it. And Jim Jordan was the one pushing it.
Yeah.
Or as John Boehner describes Jim Jordan, that idiot.
He's free to do so.
Because that's what Boehner said Jordan was, an idiot. Brought it up. And actually Sessions said, I don't want to have any part of this. Sessions said, you don't bring charges or appoint a special prosecutor unless there's reason to, and I'm not sure there's any reason to here.
Okay.
And Jordan was not happy with that, and so they had a lot of back and forth about that. Now, a lot of the people over at Lawfare, kind of a libertarian blog, think that Sessions is posturing, not threatening. That is to say, he's trying to placate his boss by saying that we'll have to consider whether or not to look at something like this, but has no intention of doing so, bolstered by his testimony yesterday, that point of view, when he flat out said he's not, there's no reason to.
Okay.
So we'll see. But the very fact that it was suggested is a norm breaker.
Yes, that's true. It gets suggested a lot, but yeah, in this setting, it shouldn't have come up.
Right. Correct. So thought that was worth emphasizing there. Ron Brownstein over at CNN points out the GOP tax plan could fuel a suburban revolt against Trump. Tremors from the suburban uprising radiate. That was, this past week in your place, Virginia and New Jersey, other places around the country, like Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. Tremors from the suburban uprising radiated from coast to coast last week. Democrats won county-level seats in Nassau, Westchester, outside of New York City, Chester, Bucks, Delaware counties outside Philadelphia, that they had rarely or never won before. In Seattle, Democrats captured a suburban Seattle state Senate seat that gave them control of the chamber. Mm-hmm. Big suburban margins in New Jersey, places like Bergen County. But the epicenter of last Tuesday's earthquake was Northern Virginia, and the result from the prosperous, growing, diverse, and well-educated suburbs outside of Washington, D.C. clearly signaled suburban voters unhappy with Trump were willing to express their discontent by voting against other Republicans on the ballot. We told you about that generic ballot from Marist and from Quinnipiac. In fact, the results signaled that Trump's weaker performance in 2016 than previous Republican nominees in well-educated suburbs around major cities may be a new normal for other GOP candidates so long as Trump's racially infused nationalism is defining the party, and then add the tax plan. So bad news for Republicans in that regard. Max Boot reviewed Trump's foreign trip He said it was Trump's worst trip ever until the next one.
There haven't been that many, but they're all the worst since the last.
Among the many things he did is acquiesce to China's not having questions asked and sitting on top of a non-free press and agreeing that, that's fine, it's okay if Duterte, arrests them. Because they're spies, I think he said it was. I mean, there's just a whole lot of bad in there talking about norms and precedents.
Right.
So that's all terrible. And I read you Catherine Brightbill's tweet storm the other day about evangelicals and how that goes. She actually wrote it up for the LA Times for those people who like long form. Mm-hmm. Roy Moore's alleged pursuit of a young girl is the symptom of a larger problem in evangelical circles. Yes. And there's a lot of, how shall we put this, April-December marriages being suggested. It's an old-fashioned term for you.
Yeah. Good euphemism. Yeah.
All right. We have Alex Azar, who is president of Lilly, as the new HHS pick, because he'll bring down drug prices.
Oh, okay. I was trying to think of what might Lilly be here. Okay. I gotcha. Eli Lilly?
Yeah, Eli Lilly.
All right. The drug manufacturer. Okay, pharmaceutical company, head of
He's a
HHS.
pharma guy.
Yes. So he'll probably bring down pharma
One of the big
prices.
lobbyists during Alex Azar's tenure was Jim Froeg, who's Trump's senior health policy advisor.
What do you know?
Investors like it.
Has he divested himself?
So, we'll see how that goes there. That's pretty much a summary for what's going on. Hope that helps you. Give you an idea of what's going on today, which is Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's Wednesday, November 15th, so it's the Ides of November.
I guess that's true. We never referred to it that way. Although you did bring me the ominous sign and asking me during the break whether I saw the picture of the Iowa delicacy.
Yes, the Iowa delicacy is a Pop-Tart sandwich with cheese in the middle.
Yeah.
It was not appetizing.
Heartland values, though.
You take a look at it and it makes you hide under the desk.
Yeah, do you know what kind of Pop-Tarts they used?
Does it matter? I wouldn't know one Pop-Tart from another, to be honest. So,
I have kids, young, and I have Pop-Tart age kids, I should say.
Yeah, you should say. Anyway, with that, this is Greg Dworkin speaking with my friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. I won't be on the show tomorrow. I've got some car maintenance duty to do.
Oh, okay.
But I will be back on Monday, and I'm sure stuff's going to happen because it seems to be happening every hour.
Yeah, it's a hell of a news cycle out there. Okay, well.
Starting in November of last year. So yes. Take care, and good luck with the renovations. And if you do get any newspaper clippings or balled up newspaper out of your walls when you're doing your renovations, be sure to read them on the show.
Yeah.
Take care, and we'll talk.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Greg. I don't know how exciting the newspaper in my walls will be. This house was built in 1995, I think, and many of us were alive at the time. And, I mean, same goes for the 60s, of course, but fewer, I suppose, of us anyway. I don't think there's anything exciting, although I do know of at least one portion of the house where they, in initial construction, did forget to put insulation in. Well, we've fixed it since then. Anyway, didn't mean to offend anybody with Pop-Tart sandwich denigration, but, man, that did not look good. And I did see the picture of it. It made me marvel briefly during the break about what goes viral and, what does, although, we're in the same Twitter circles, basically. So most anything that circulates in one of our feeds is going to end up in another. So I guess, did you see that? Does that count as viral if you and me and, 6 million friends in our political circles saw it, but nobody else in the country did? I hope not, although, I don't want to insult Iowans. But what the hell is that? You're crazy there. I said it is. There's local things all over the country that people eat. I don't know why that one, I know why it would be confined to Iowa in the sense that it seemed like the sort of thing which ought to be quarantined and prevented from spreading. But I guess let me know on the hashtag KITM via Twitter if you are from Iowa and think that's great and don't understand why anyone else doesn't like it, or are not from Iowa and have no connection to Iowa but eat those things anyway. They literally, it looked like they took a piece of, American cheese, a slice, one of the individually wrapped slices of American cheese and just slap it between two Pop-Tarts. I don't know whether you toast it and melt the cheese. I don't know whether you don't toast it. My kids eat the Pop-Tarts without popping. That is to say, there's no toaster involved in them. I don't like eating them cold. I prefer them warmed up, and I prefer the old school fruit-filled ones. My kids like the ones that are like basically full of cake frosting, and like the newfangled, what we'll call newfangled flavors like cookies and cream and s'mores. And s'mores is good, and it's not that far removed from the equal, I guess, old school but not fruit-filled. They had the cinnamon brown sugar ones or something like that. Those were pretty good too. I mean, they're all probably terrible for you, but eating, you know what's worse than eating a Pop-Tart is eating two of them in a single sitting, even though they come in packs of two, and I guess that's the serving size. But worse than that would be putting American cheese in between them and eating them. And that's one for me, just bad news. I hate American cheese in any setting. And in between two otherwise serviceable Pop-Tarts seems to me like a real problem. But I'm not the person to go to on the cheese issues because I will surprise and disappoint cheese lovers everywhere. And, of course, people from cheese culture will really lose their minds about things like that. So it's the next, or possibly the one thing worse than condemning cilantro. Occasionally you can get some support on the cilantro front, but cheese, I think I'm pretty much alone. There are others who don't like cheese, but anyway. And there's probably more who won't like cheese between Pop-Tarts. I don't know. I don't know why I'm obsessed with it. But if you think I'm crazy, I can only tell you that thousands of people were sharing this picture on Twitter, so there must be something to it. So, let's see. What other things deserve attention? Well, I don't know. But there are things that we will give attention to nonetheless that I have put away for us in pocket. Let's see. Among the many things, I guess, what can we add to the Roy Moore pile for the day? We'll have to add this one. I don't know what you're going to make of this. And the circumstances are slightly changed. But, for instance, let's see, last night and for the last couple of days, of course, we've seen vigorous defenses of Roy Moore offered by a number of people, many of whom have no excuse, but at least one who does have, if not an excuse, reason to, you would expect to see her rising to his defense, his wife. She's not going to, obviously, acknowledge that he's a serial sexual predator. But one item that we need to add to the pile of evidence, brought up here by Daniel Dale, among others, Roy Moore's wife, Kayla is her name, Kayla, as it happens, is a classmate of the most recent accuser, the fifth woman to come forward, Beverly Young Nelson, and the one who came forward with the most serious sounding allegations of the bunch, who was locked in the car by Roy Moore and who grabbed her by the neck and tried to force her head down and also groped her in various ways. They're classmates. That means they're the same age, and yeah, that means that when Beverly Young Nelson was 16 and a sophomore in high school and was assaulted by a 30-something-year-old Roy Moore, Kayla was likewise 16 and a sophomore in the same high school. Then she was, of course, Kayla Kisor, Kisor, was her surname. And there's kind of a weird story about their meeting, as you might have guessed. And there's some mitigating circumstances to it, too, but Daniel Dale was tweeting out, I thought, an apt observation about the article, saying, "This article is written with what seems to be a raised eyebrow. It is also from AL.com, where we were reading yesterday. The tweet that features the link says, Roy and Kayla Moore have been married 32 years and have 4 grown children. But how did their relationship begin?" That is, I think, a valid question. And any point in time, but in particular, this point in time. When did Roy Moore meet his wife? The subject of AL.com's, I guess, the latest dispatch that I've grabbed from the Roy Moore saga. Amy Yurkanin, Yurkanin, hope I've got that one right, reporting on this one for AL.com. According to recent allegations in the Washington Post and AL.com, Roy Moore routinely pursued much younger women while he was in his early 30s until he met and married a woman 14 years his junior. Moore was 38 when he married 24-year-old Kayla Kaiser. And I think that enters into the territory in which people are more apt to say, well, 24, while relatively young, is still adulthood, and women can make their own choices at that point. The age difference is there, but it somehow seems not so terrible. There's some very weird dynamics around age differences, and it's very difficult. Once you're talking about adult women, the age difference thing becomes very difficult to justify worrying about, really, at some point. But there's big age differences out there. This is not as huge. And 24, okay, you make a decision. They met a year before they got married, according to Moore's biography entitled So Help Me God. And really, he could use some help, God. So I would say at this point, help the man out, show him what to do, guide him out of the race, whatever it is. And after that, that's between you and him. So is that it? They met the year before. He met her when she was 23 and he was 37, 38. Still might raise an eyebrow here and there, but 23, okay. But is that the whole story? Moore wrote that he had been invited to recite poetry at a church Christmas party and spotted his future wife in the crowd. Sitting with her mother on the sofa against the wall was a beautiful young woman. Moore wrote, I learned that her name was Kayla, which in the context of his autobiography is perfectly reasonable. Of course, if he had said it to me the other day, sitting against the sofa, sitting on a sofa against the wall with her, was a beautiful young woman sitting with her mother. Okay, Roy, are you sure she's old enough? Whatever. I might have wondered about that. But, flowery language, looking back about the woman you married, seems like a fairly normal thing to have. Okay. In his book, Roy Moore said he had seen Kayla, quote, many years earlier, although it doesn't specify how old she was when she first caught his eye. And I would say this was a big stretch if we didn't know the backstory on Roy Moore. I would say, what are you fishing for controversy for? What do you mean many years? Like maybe she was 20. That's many years, I guess. It's not that many. It's less than the age difference between them, certainly. But of course, we know more about Roy Moore now, and so we're perhaps justified in raising an eyebrow. Women who spoke to the Washington Post said Moore asked them for dates in the late 1970s. Moore left Alabama in 1983, traveled to Texas and Australia, and returned in 1984. Around the same time, he met Kayla Kaiser at the church Christmas party. Okay, so a few years have passed, and he's back, and now she's 23 years old. But time out for just a second. The exploration is the timing here, and we're going to get to that. But let me just put an asterisk on this paragraph. And maybe I should come back to it later, see if I can remember to come back to it. And I'll continue here. Many years before, let's go into the many years situation. Many years before, I had attended a dance recital at Gadsden State Junior College, Roy Moore wrote. I remembered one of the special dances performed by a young woman whose first and last names began with the letter K. It's a strong recollection. It was something I had never forgotten, which, knowing what we know about him, is a little weird and creepy. Could that young woman have been Kayla Kaiser? Anxious to meet her, I began with the line, haven't we met somewhere before? Now, again, this is all, I don't know. It doesn't paint an entirely clear picture. After all, the dance recital was at Gadsden State Junior College, and so it's possible, it might plant the seed in your mind that the woman was a The young woman was a student at the junior college, which would make her 18, 19 years old and still a little young, but a little closer, well, certainly over the age of consent and a little closer to an age where we say, okay, I don't think you're the most mature person in the world, but let's say we'll let you vote or drink alcohol. And look, plenty of people get married at 18, 19 years old. That's not out of the ordinary. It's young. Parents may counsel you otherwise, but it's still within the range of acceptable, mores, I guess, for the most part in society. On the other hand, of course, the recital could have been being held at the nearest auditorium facility like Gadsden State Junior College, but may have been performed by girls much younger than those who might be students at Gadsden State Junior College. We just don't know, and it doesn't say in here. And ordinarily we could dismiss it, but knowing his background, we have to question these things. And then, of course, haven't we met somewhere before? Like when I was working as a Santa's helper elf in the mall when I was 14? Is that what you mean? Well, Roy Moore, it says, goes on from there to say, he had a sense that his relationship with Kayla would be significant. I knew Kayla was going to be a special person in my life. Roy Moore, very nice flowery language. Long afterward, I would learn that Kayla had, in fact, performed that special dance routine at Gadsden State years before. So, good on you, good memory, but I guess we can't be too impressed given that we know that he uses that long memory for sometimes nefarious purposes. Anyway, Kayla Moore was divorced and had a young daughter when Roy married her in 1985. So she had made the choice to marry and start a family at a young age, even without Roy Moore influencing her to do it. So maybe there wasn't all that much going on there, but it does raise eyebrows. We'll be back to raise more of them after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It is the shorter of the two breaks we take here. Well, time for us to wind down the music. I do really should spend some time engineering the 1 minute break because this is kind of a pain in the butt, manually lowering the music away. I'll get to work on that right after the show. It's tough to do these things because you kind of want to take off the headphones and put the show out of your mind for a little while, but there's work to do afterwards. Let's see. Okay, so where were we with this? We can wind up with the Roy Moore article and our observations on it, although I see already things are swirling on Twitter that I feel like we ought to fit into the show. So that's a good sign that we should begin to wrap things up. But as we mentioned, Kayla Moore was already married and divorced and had a young daughter when they married in 1985, and I guess presumably when he met her, let's see, that would have been in 1984. So she was already, I assume, already divorced in 1984, but who knows? I mean, I guess that's another hole that isn't really filled in all of this. But I suppose if she was at the church poetry recital sitting on the couch next to her mother, and let's say not her, then perhaps by then estranged, if not divorced, ex-husband, then husband, then I guess it was fair game. Anyway, she was an adult when they dated and married, but she did attend school, the article notes, with the woman who accused Roy Moore of sexual assault in a Monday appearance orchestrated by attorney Gloria Allred. Beverly Young Nelson said she was a sophomore at Southside High School in 1977 alongside Kayla Kaiser. In the Washington Post story from last week, 4 women said Moore asked them for dates when they were between the ages of 14 and 18. He was in his early 30s at the time, working as a prosecutor in the Etowah County District Attorney's Office. I think no new news in this paragraph. Moore has denied the allegations, of course. In an interview with Sean Hannity, Roy Moore said he didn't generally date women in their teens when he was in his 30s. I don't really know what he thinks he means by that one, but everyone else says the opposite. I don't remember dating any girl without the permission of her mother, Roy Moore said during that interview with Hannity. But then it goes on to talk about the enduring partnership between Roy and Kayla Moore. They have been married now for 32 years, 4 grown children. Kayla Moore, president of the Foundation for Moral Law. And why not? the nonprofit foundation founded by her husband after he was removed from the Alabama State Supreme Court in 2003 for displaying a granite monument to the Ten Commandments. So he put her to work there. The organization offers legal support for conservative Christian issues, such as public prayer and the opposition to same-sex marriage. She earned $195,000 over 3 years as head of the Foundation for Moral Law. That's just another issue we could look into. Kayla Moore defended her husband in an interview with none other than Breitbart News. "You know, we met at a Bible study. That's where we met," Kayla Moore said. "We raised our children in Bible-focused Christian home." I think they mean in a, perhaps, Bible-focused Christian home. You know, it's just not true, any of it. You mean raising their children Bible-focused? No, it's the allegations against him. They're not true because they met at a church function and they had a Bible-focused Christian home. So there you go. That's all you have to do to believe them, is believe that. Anyway, what can you do? She's going to stand by his side. Back to the asterisk that I left behind before. I'm just sort of curious, can we now have an investigation? It doesn't have to be an investigation, but just a little bit of reporting into this. Moore left Alabama in 1983, traveled to Texas and Australia, returned in 1984. Met Kayla Kaiser, settled down, off the market, so finally people can stop talking about his preying on teenagers. Although, I don't know. I mean, it'd be really interesting to see if there were any reports of him approaching teenagers and asking for dates post-1985 when he got married. That would be interesting for, the original reason plus a new reason on top of that. But not nearly as disturbing as the original reason was. I guess my question, though, is what makes Roy Moore leave Alabama in 1983? He comes back fairly soon. I mean, so it could be just like, I felt like seeing the world, and Texas and Australia was how I defined that world, and I left. Or is it like, I mean, consider that he leaves Alabama after being banned from the Gadsden Mall and the YMCA is what I'm getting at here. And who knows where else. Still waiting, by the way, for that shoe to drop on how he got banned from the YMCA. No explanation so far on that one. Sean Hannity, if I may give you a tip on this one. The explanation you get from him, if you get one from him, should include an explanation of how he got himself banned from the YMCA, because we still haven't heard anyone say, yes, Roy Moore badgered me, approached me, harassed me, whatever, in the YMCA while I was there. So he's banned from it without explanation. We are left to suppose that he did something there. Maybe he didn't wipe down the exercise equipment after using it. I don't know. But no explanation for that one. I'd still like to see it. And I'd like to know, is anybody poking around and asking whether his leaving Alabama for a year has any connection to his having been banned from so many local institutions for having badgered the young girls there and solicited sex from them. So I just wonder whether we'll ever get a report on that one. I think that's probably it for like Roy Moore just for the moment, although you never know. Oh, yes. Well, there is one other question. And I did see this. Tegan Goddard's Political Wire picking up this story. And I guess from the Politico playbook, more questions about, is expelling Moore, if elected, a viable plan? The excerpt he uses here, expulsion takes a while. It's tricky. The Senate hasn't expelled a member in more than a century, but is there an argument to be made that the Republicans would be better off electing Moore, expelling him, and then getting Alabama's Republican governor to appoint another Republican senator? That way, 2 Republicans don't split the vote in December, and Republicans actually get to take action to expel someone whose behavior they say they find abhorrent. If the Senate has to expel Moore, it could tear the party apart even further and embolden Steve Bannon in his war against incumbents. And it could look like the Senate is subverting the will of the voters. By the way, remember this, November was supposed to be all about tax reform. Republicans don't want to be talking about whether their Senate candidate in Alabama has had an unusually high interest in high school girls. That's probably true. And not much in the way of explaining the viability of expulsion in that one, but more examining the politics around the ploy. really. I don't know whether there's more to it in Playbook, but we'll just take Tagan's word for it that was the part that was chiefly of interest, and move on from there to one other sort of segue observation from more into the more general. Interesting discussion here. Is it a tweet storm, or is it just one? No, I guess it's just one tweet, but a good one at that. Dr. Kelly Senholz, let's see, she tweets as MTN, like Mountain, MD, which I don't think means Maryland. I think it means doctor. That's because she's Dr. Kelly Senholz. Can I get a peek at the Twitter profile here? Let's see. MD, and it also says EM. Is she an emergency medicine doctor? Is that what that means, Greg? Formerly Pollyanna, but now Cassandra. Hashtag Banana Republicans need not apply. That tells you a little bit about where she is coming from. And she had this, I thought, very interesting observation. Based on what? I'm not entirely sure. Looks like she's responding to a tweet from Fernand R. Amandi, another, this time verified Twitter participant with whom I am not familiar. Are all fake Christians disturbed? Pastor of Florida's biggest megachurch accused of molesting a 4-year-old girl. Well, it's in the news everywhere, and of course, lots of people are doing it, and it only makes a splashy headline when it's somebody who you're supposed to think shouldn't be involved in such things. That would be, of course, everybody in the world, but especially pastors or district attorneys, and for some reason we think that's more lurid than just about anybody doing those things, and it's pretty lurid no matter who does that. But she observes this. Based on what? I'm not entirely sure, but I thought it rang true, so I would share it. Pedophiles, and even, I guess, hebophiles, pedophiles often try to take on the mantle of, quote, goodness, which helps them avoid detection. You understand what she's talking about here? And as the case of Roy Moore, it has also helped him avoid detection. This is the observation I think is so interesting. It's possible his whole political career is based on this need to avoid detection/arrest. Wouldn't that be interesting? I mean, imagine that. I do think about that from time to time when we have one of these splashy, especially lurid stories, that I think, I wonder whether which came first here, the chicken or the egg? Are we talking about a person who said, I will take advantage of the fact that I am district attorney, the fact that I'm a pastor, the fact that I occupy a position that would make people say, what? When they hear these allegations, what? No way. He couldn't. He never would. He's a pastor, for God's sake. He's the district attorney, for God's sake. He's a cop, for God's sake. He's a judge. He's a politician. He's a senator. But it happens so often, you begin to wonder whether it's happening because people say, I have power and I'll take advantage of it, or whether people say, look, they realize early on, this is my predilection. This is my preference. This is what I do. And it's wrong, and I realize it, even if I wish it wasn't wrong, and I think everyone else is wrong for thinking it's wrong, I recognize that this could get me in trouble in society, and I need to seek out a position that will give me cover. That I can say, come on, do you really believe that? I'm a pastor, for God's sake. Come on, do you really believe that? I'm a DA. Why would I do something like that? And in some cases, you're really talking about additional layers of protection. Like, well, not only should you not believe it because, that's, or you could tell the third parties, you shouldn't believe that rumor about me. I'm a pastor. You shouldn't believe that rumor about me. I'm the DA. But in the case of Roy Moore, allegedly, it also gives you the power to say, you should not try to get other people to believe what I just did to you because, one, they won't believe you anyway because I'm the DA. And two, I can actually make your life a living hell. And pastors, in some cases, can do that as well. If you're the big church in town and the little town revolves around the big church, Right? You can get away with these things. I think that's an interesting observation. It's definitely something that I wonder about, and the fact that it really could work out the other way. Like, I need to pursue this kind of career because it's ideal cover for my behavior, which I recognize will get me in trouble because it's wrong. I'm going to work actively to cover it up. It seems like an aggravating factor in the crime to me, and might be impossible to prove, but perhaps ought to be taken into account. I got a note here along the way, by the way. I guess Armando recognized the name I had called out and wanted to forward me a note about who was who. Fernando Anandi, a former Democratic consultant turned Miami radio announcer. Okay, so that makes a certain amount of sense. It was a Miami Herald local news piece. And you can see his Twitter handle is Amandi on Air. So there you go. That neatly wraps up that little package. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting observation from Dr. Kelly there. Here are a few other random observations. First one that came across the Twitter transom, just because what else could go wrong? Down in Texas, where they started with open carry of firearms last year after some amount of time, or open carry of handguns. Apparently, open carry of long guns was previously permitted in Texas, and they thought, why have that and not handguns? And indeed, that doesn't make that much less sense once if you're still stuck with open carry of long rifles is okay, then I guess you might as well have handguns too. And I don't know, maybe somebody opened their mouths and said, well, that's pretty dumb. I mean, really, honestly, are we going back to the old days? Are we going to have open carry of swords allowed? And I guess somebody thought that was a seriously good idea, because open carry of swords and machetes begins in Texas today. Isn't that a fantastic one? There's a listing here of all the new laws that they're bringing online here. And I don't know. I don't know what to tell you about it. I'll include it in a roundup, but there you go. I want to retweet it so that everybody can see it, but it feels like it demands some additional comment. Perhaps I'll hold on to it until I can think of exactly what the hell we want to say about that. By the way, of course, is it interesting that they included the open carry of machetes as well? Because, well, you know what? Honestly, at this point, if we're going to have to analyze a law this stupid, wouldn't it have made arguably some sense to say, well, open carry of machetes, like, okay, it's a hand tool that you might need in some places. I don't know where. I mean, I guess let's say you're a sugarcane field worker. Well, this machete is my hand tool, and I would like to be able to, say, cross the street from the sugarcane field and go to the taco truck and get some lunch. And somebody may say, you can't carry that machete on the street. And I will say, well, I'm 10 feet away from the sugarcane field. I don't know whether you would have a taco truck across the street from a sugarcane field, or whether, the logistics are just nightmarish, I tell you. But okay, I guess I could think of a reason why you might possibly carry a machete outside of the field. But a sword, I'm not really sure. Like, we're filming Game of Thrones across the street here in El Paso, right? That's the common location for shooting a show like that. No, it's not? Okay. But you say, I forgot to take it off. This two-handed broadsword strapped to my side. I just forgot I was carrying it, whatever. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to see with this. But it seems like, are you on your way to a costume party or a role-playing place? Or, I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, and I thought I would take this thing. And where do you even get them? And I know you can buy them in weirdo, shops in the mall where you can buy swords and knives and posters of dragons and I don't know what else, what they were allowed to tell you in Texas and what they're not. But, man, it's just weird. So I assume we'll see a couple of people taking advantage of it just to be able to do it and to see whether they can get people. There's a lot of people who are provocateurs and like to see if they can make people call the police and then argue with the cops. That's white people, by the way, arguing with the cops over, no, there's a brand new law that says I can carry a sword, don't you know? Because they might not bring that up in the morning briefing with all the cops, assuming that they do things like they did them on Hill Street Blues. That's my only understanding of how does a morning begin for cops? It has to happen that way, right? Maybe not. Anyway, let's see. We'll move on to some more, let's say, relevant stories. That's the word I'm looking for. Relevance. Yes. Okay. Let's see. A couple of other interesting stories we got to enter on the record. There's this very odd story from BuzzFeed. And I guess, well, it's Jason Leopold, also with Anthony Cormier and Jessica Garrison on this one. Jason Leopold, I think everybody likes Jason Leopold, but Jason Leopold does occasionally allow himself to run away, or allow his imagination, perhaps, let's say, to run away with it. And it's an admirable trait in friends. It's not something that you want to happen frequently to your journalist friends, but sometimes it happens. This one, I don't know, but it's out there and it's already been, kind of halfway rebutted. And so, and to be honest, I'm inclined, I guess, to accept the explanation / rebuttal, but we'll put this one out there because it is out there. Secret finding is the headline at BuzzFeed News. 60 Russian payments, quote, to finance election campaign of 2016. What? Yeah, the FBI, for whatever reason, is scrutinizing more than 60 money transfers sent by the Russian Foreign Ministry to its embassies across the globe, most of them bearing a note that said the money was to be used, quote, to finance election campaign of 2016. Now, a spokesperson for the Russian government says the money paid for overseas voting in its parliamentary election. And doesn't that seem like a much more reasonable explanation than sending money? I know that raises eyebrows. It's supposed to pay for the election campaign of 2016, but we weren't the only one who had one. And, of course, why bother sending the money to the Russian embassy in, I don't know, let's see some of the other names, countries named here, Afghanistan and Nigeria. What are you going to do with that money to influence American elections if you're sending them to Afghanistan? Was Afghanistan having elections? I don't think so. But I don't know. This managed to get through the editorial process and printed at BuzzFeed, so let's find out about it. On August 3rd of last year, just as the U.S. presidential election was entering its final heated phase, the Russian Foreign Ministry sent nearly $30,000 to its embassy in Washington. The wire transfer, which came from a Kremlin-backed Russian bank, landed in one of the embassy's Citibank accounts and contained a remarkable memo line to finance election campaign of 2016. That wire transfer is one of more than 60 now being scrutinized by the FBI and other federal agencies investigating Russian involvement in the U.S. election. The transactions, which moved through Citibank accounts and totaled more than $380,000, came, each one, from the Russian Foreign Ministry and most contained that memo line referencing the 2016 election. The money wound up at Russian embassies in almost 60 countries, from Afghanistan to Nigeria, between August 3rd and September 20th, 2016. It is not clear how the funds were used. At least one transaction that came to the U.S. originated with VTB Bank, a financial institution that is majority owned by the Kremlin. So I don't know. But like I said, and it seems, I don't know whether they originally had that hedge in the BuzzFeed news piece, but there were other reporters out there saying, that would probably have been for consular and overseas voting in the Russian parliamentary elections, though there were some questions raised about whether or not they actually did conduct such voting in the parliamentary elections. I am not positive whether they did or didn't, but the story didn't make a great deal of sense to me on its face, but it was part of the puzzle and much talked about yesterday, and so we'll note it for the record, along with the very stout objection that that's probably not why you would send, influencing the American election probably wouldn't be done by sending money to Nigeria or Afghanistan. And of course, the oddness of labeling this thing for use in crime. You don't really ordinarily do that, unless, of course, you were just trolling the FBI, which is possible for the Russians at this point, or really at any point. Okay, other items up for bids today, to borrow a phrase from the old Price is Right. Let's see. Oh, yes, I got this interesting note in the mail the other day from one of our sometimes contributors. Let's see. We could have a contributor's corner in here today. Let's see. We have, I'm just trying to check up on other items here today. I wonder whether we may or may not, is there news breaking that we may not hear from Joan? She may be tied up with other items, or of course it's possible that she's just listening in rapt attention to the show, or wrapped up in other things, or just plain forgetting. It does happen from time to time, and we don't blame her for it. It gives us an opportunity to bring up the there's Joan now. Or maybe that may have woken her up with that. Hi, Joan. How you doing?
Hi there. I'm calling just in time for the station break, aren't I?
Well, almost. I've got a couple of minutes there.
Not really a station break.
Right, but we just break ourselves. We break all the momentum and all. We're not quite there just yet, but hi. Are you wrapped up in some breaking news today, or just stuff at home, or?
No, I was trying to respond to Obamacare repeal.
Okay.
Once again, alive in.
Yeah.
The fight is back on.
Yeah, so it was that the Rand Paul idea of shoehorning the repeal of the individual mandate into the tax bill, or something else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We're on target for that one then.
That's on the Senate side.
Yeah.
On the House side, they're doing the rule today.
Oh, yes.
For the tax bill and the first bit of debate.
Mm-hmm.
And then plan on doing the vote on the bill tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, I heard a little bit about the rule for the bill.
Yeah, tell me about this.
Well, let's see. I heard that it's a closed rule, and that they were not allowing any amendments to the bill. And I think we've got that right. But at any rate, what I had read was that they had broken the record for the most closed rules in a single session. And we're not done yet. But, of course, this was during the big pledge to return to regular order, and this is the furthest possible thing from it. But, I guess we'll have to see. And I guess there was some question about whether they were going to definitely follow through on it. But a closed rule is ordinarily, as we told listeners before, an indication that they have very little control over what they think their own conference is going to do with this thing. And if they allow any amendments, that means they worry that either that some Democratic amendments that they might consider to be poison pills might pass, or that one of their own might actually offer something
Louis
up.
Gohmert.
Yeah. That's either, something from like the Freedom Caucus that only the real wackos want to have anything to do with, and the, more mainstream-ish, if there is such a thing, Republicans would find a suicidal vote, and they don't want to allow that. But I did also hear... I
don't think this leaves room for, because the Senate announced that they were including repeal yesterday afternoon. I don't know if that left them room on the House side to get it into the rule. I don't think it did. So I don't think they're going to be able to include it on the House side. But Paul Ryan says he would accept it in conference.
I guess that's a possibility, too. I suppose they could probably try to engineer something, but you never know what the delicacy of their situation is. They could still come up with a closed rule that simply adopts that as an amendment to the chairman's mark somehow. But they can do almost anything, I guess, over there. I also
have to watch the rules debate today to see what they manage. Yeah.
I understand that there's also something else of particular interest, and that if I read it correctly, maybe I should save it for the other side of the break, but we'll be able to blurt it out here. Armando was tweeting last night that apparently, we know that this tax bill will end up raising taxes for really, for most of us, cutting taxes for the 1%. But apparently, one of the old House rules that the Republicans liked in their conference and carried over to the House rules, here comes our break music, by the way, was a requirement of a 3/5 vote to raise taxes. And because they never used to do that, you never thought that was going to come up. But apparently it will. So, all right, yeah, we'll discuss that a little bit after this ill-timed break. And I guess we could just ignore the whole thing, but I'm so in practice
that and
with
the bird bath.
All right, we'll be back after this in 2 minutes. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. We are here with Joan McCarter. It sounds like a very busy day in the virtual newsroom, so we may not have her for very long, so we should get right to the agenda here. And she's tweeted me this or sent me this link to Bloomberg's write-up about it. House panel considers waiving rule that makes tax hikes harder. You want to... Are you up to speed on this one? Want to tell us what that's about?
I've just skimmed, but
yeah? Okay.
As you were saying, they've got the rule that they adopted, I don't know how many years ago. How long has that been around?
Oh, you know what? I'm not sure. But it feels like, I don't know whether that goes back to 2010 or whether that's that's probably something they proposed and maybe put in place in their rule package in the Newt Gingrich Republican Revolution. As well. I'm not certain
it sounds
if it
like a very Gingrich kind of thing to do, doesn't it?
Yeah, because it's biting them in the ass. That's why.
Yes. What they have to have, according to this existing rule, is a 3/5 majority to vote for any bill that raises taxes.
Yeah.
They're not going to have 3/5 majority on this bill that does indeed raise taxes. So
yeah.
They've got to waive their own rule, break their own rule on not raising taxes to raise taxes on the majority of us. Oh, and by the way, cut $25 billion from Medicare next year.
Yes, that would be, I think, probably the more... This is embarrassing, true, but more damaging is the... so that's immediate, too. That's not hidden in the 10th year or anything.
No, it's because of sequestration. This is one of the effects that's going to happen is that they've got to cut spending where they can. One of the places that they can is Medicare, and it's going to be $25 billion next year.
Wow.
If this thing passes.
Just another note about that sequestration, right? Nobody wanted this. Don't worry, because nobody wanted it, it'll never happen. Here we are, just pointing that one out.
Yep.
Okay.
At the time, I argued sequestration wasn't going to be as disastrous as the cuts that they were looking at, because cuts that they were looking at included social insurance programs. You know, it was back to the grand bargain of chain CPI and all of those various cuts to not just Medicare, but Social Security, Medicaid.
Yeah,
but
I gotcha.
Here we are, sequestration how many years later, and this is where we're at.
Yeah, we really have.
What this has done?
Yes.
The minute Obamacare repeal came up again, the major provider groups, insurers, doctors, hospitals were ready. They had a letter just waiting for the word for Mitch McConnell to step up to the microphone, blasting us. AARP has their folks already on the Hill today in their red T-shirts, attending the Senate Finance Committee meeting and going to members' offices. They've, as Topher Spiro tweeted, awakened a sleeping giant.
Well,
we've
I'm glad
defeated Obamacare repeal 3 times already.
Yeah,
we can do it again.
All the other ones, right? These are serious efforts at it, not counting the 70 or so prior attempts, I guess.
Right.
Pretty amazing.
So we're back.
Yeah, and I think I saw one observation on Twitter the other day, which was, every time we've brought a bill to the floor recently with repeal in it, it's failed. Why don't we add that, killing line to the tax bill as well and see how we deal with that? Sure. I don't know whether they thought people would love tax cuts so much that they would change their minds about repeal, but I mean, it seems kind of dumb, and all right, go for it, whatever. we'll be there to fight. Don't hand wave at it and say whatever. But yeah, at least the groups were prepared. That is good news.
We've got two major themes that have emerged from Republicans. There are two things that they can do, and I don't think that they've thought much beyond those two things. Tax cuts for the rich, repealing Obamacare. The Trump Care bill, remember that?
Yeah.
It was a big tax giveaway to the wealthy, hiding within the health care bill. Now we've got a tax bill that has health care repeal hiding within it. It's nuts, these guys.
It does not seem imaginative, does it?
It is not
hide
imaginative.
A and B. That didn't work. Could we hide B and A?
Maybe.
You could try, but I think people oppose both A and B. Oh. Well,
as Greg was saying earlier, one of the things that they're trying to do in the Senate is attach this to the Alexander Murray bill. Like they think that maybe can get some Democrats in if they promise they'll do the Alexander Murray bill to make CSR payments at the same time. They're not going to get any Democrats with that.
No.
I don't know if they will overcome objections of Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins with that one. But what they will do to try to get Murkowski is also give her Arctic refuge drilling.
Oh.
That's yeah.
Yeah, I guess before you become a big Lisa Murkowski fan for her standing up and those things occasionally, you should remind yourself that one of the things that can be done to, what at least they think, to pull her in on something she otherwise doesn't like is something none of the rest of us like.
Destroy Alaska.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's always that. Okay. Let's see. And I know, you're a little constrained on time, but other items you'd like to bring up? I don't want to steer everything, but I thought those two items were very important.
I did see a follow-up on the Pop-Tart controversy.
That is important.
Actually not real Pop-Tarts. They were generic toaster pastries.
So I'm sorry to Kellogg's Corporation.
Concocted this thing said.
Okay. I mean, was this like...
it was a hoax.
Oh?
So.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he was hungry. It was late at night. He didn't have anything to eat in his dorm.
Okay.
And he thought, what is the grossest thing I can put between two toaster pastries? And he decided it was American cheese.
Yes.
And then one of his roommates said he had to actually take a bite out of it or it would not be believable on Twitter. So.
Well, kids and their dares. I mean, I guess there's worse things, even those things available on the shelves at a supermarket that you could put between the Pop-Tarts, but generic non-Pop-Tarts.
Fish would be worse.
Yeah, right. I mean, anything. Right? There's a million things that could be very bad. But all right, well, at least it was a hoax.
It's important to know that no actual trademarked Pop-Tart was
harmed,
endangered in this experiment.
No Kellogg's products were harmed in the making of this hoax. That is good news, and good news for those of you in Battle Creek and Iowa, really. The rest, I think they owe an apology to the Iowans they besmirched.
I think so, too, by saying this was an Iowa thing.
Right. You ain't from, I don't know whether they said ain't, but you're not from Iowa if you haven't had one of these. And I assume people fainted all over Iowa.
I would assume so.
Man. Okay, well,
right.
I'm glad to know.
Pop-Tart thing aside, let's see, what else have we got today?
Really?
This is the big one, obviously. Bringing back this fight. Here we go again.
Oh. You're going to say net neutrality, aren't you? Okay.
So, 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol Hill switchboard that will connect you to everybody you need to talk to.
Oh, so you can weigh in on the tax / ruin everything bill.
Oh, and by the way, remind them that it's now been 46 days since CHIP expired. And if they're going to be taking health care away from all these millions of people and cutting Medicare, at least take care of the kids.
You would think. But, I guess they're not moved by that.
Between Children's Health and the community health centers that were also in the funding bill that didn't end up being passed at the end of the fiscal year, it's about 35 million people.
Wow.
getting their health care through these two bills, through CHIP and through community health center funding.
Is there any indication? I mean, I know I keep seeing Democrats bringing it up that, it's getting late. It's almost December. We have to reauthorize CHIP. Is there any discussion of it on the Republican side? Like, yes, we're going to do it, but for the moment we're ignoring it? Or
on the House side, they passed their sham bill, so they pointed at that.
Okay,
on the Senate side, Mitch McConnell's not said boo about it. And surprisingly, neither has Orrin Hatch. Who generally has been very good on this. In fact, he and Ron Wyden came up with a good funding bill that was going to be an authorization for 5 years, which is phenomenal. It's fantastic. But Orrin Hatch has been AWOL on this.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty going on, of course, to keep you preoccupied, but still, I would have thought if he even wanted to fake caring, he would. And if it's his own bill, then he might have said something. That is odd. That's complete silence on that.
It's very odd, and it's got the states particularly really freaking out. Texas is now getting ready to start sending the letters out to families saying, sorry, we're not sure that this program is going to exist next month. They've got, I think the number of children in Texas covered is 900,000.
That's not so many.
And they're also trying to grapple with the fact, okay, so they pass it, but they pass it sometime in December when we've already had to send out these letters and we already had to remove people. Does our state law actually allow us to reinstate those people we kicked off?
I wonder. That's the sort of thing that makes you wonder whether there's intent in that. Like, if we reauthorize it after that and the states can't reinstate those people, then can we count that as savings if they don't come back on?
Kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yes. It's almost like they want to slash spending on health care for the poor and children all around the country, as evidenced by they keep doing it. That's extraordinary evidence of their desire to do so, I think. But
I think so as well. 202-224-3121.
Yes, pretty easy to remember, and just know who you're asking for. Name your senator, name your congressperson, and they'll connect. Or you know what? Name your state, and they'll send you to the right senators.
Absolutely.
And from there,
and with that, I'm afraid I have to leave you, my friend.
I am afraid of that. That does worry me a great deal for a number of reasons, not the least of which is it must mean hell's a poppin' on the front page at some point. So we will keep an eye on that, and we'll have to let you. We'll have to let you go. We'll leave it there.
Right. I'll try to. If I can't catch you later next week, it'll definitely be. Later this week, it'll definitely be next Wednesday.
Okay. Yes. And then we'll be all be ready for the big Thanksgiving break after that.
Right.
Don't forget that. And if you have to be,
that's already happening.
Yeah, I know. It's the years flying by here. So if there's no room for the computer in between all the turkeys cooking, let me know.
All right.
Very good. Thanks, Joan. Thanks for stopping by. Good luck with things today. I know it's crazy out there.
Thank you much. Check the front page of Daily Kos. You'll see it all happening there.
Yes, and you'll find plenty of reminders of that phone number, too.
202-224-3121.
All right. With built-in pauses for you to write it down. Thanks, Joan.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Let's see. So before we were speaking with her, I was telling you that we had at least one very interesting listener contribution here. And it goes back a ways. But David Paquette wrote to me saying, noting for us that we had mentioned in passing, anyway. I know I had mentioned John Roberts and his take on voting rights and civil rights issues. You know, the whole racism is kind of a thing of the past thing, and we don't necessarily need the statutory protections for minority voting that the Voting Rights Act put in place, etc. And I didn't get specific about it, but those who know the lingo and know the citations know that we were referring, as David says here, to Shelby County v. Holder and the Roberts opinion there. So he writes, having mentioned that in passing, you may recall that Roberts had telegraphed the Voting Rights Act decision back in 2009. And he notes for the record and includes for our perusal here, to my surprise, the Times, New York Times that would be, printed my reserved but snarky comment on that decision's toe in the water of gutting Section 5. So a little travel back in time to June 26th, 2009, just by way of giving credit where credit is due to our fabulous pool of listeners. David Paquette's letter to the editor, printed in the New York Times, to the editor regarding the Voting Rights Act survives. That was the title of, believe it or not, the editorial of June 23rd, 2009. As you point out, David writes, Chief Justice John G. Roberts, Jr., to give you the full name, has laid the groundwork for striking down the Voting Rights Act's Section 5, which, quote, requires states and local governments to pre-clear changes in voting rules with the Justice Department or a federal court to determine whether they would harm minority voting rights. Of course, our current situation is now they no longer had to pre-clear anything. All of a sudden, every state dominated by Republicans began imposing these restrictions designed essentially to suppress the minority vote. And lo and behold, for the first time in 50 years or so, freed from those constraints, these restrictions come online, and weirdly, unpredictably, contrary to what all the polls told us, we elected the most racist, idiotic president of all time. What a weird result. In his ruling, David continued, he didn't get quite that snarky in his piece here. In his ruling, the Chief Justice remarked that the country has undergone a social transformation since the law was passed, and that changing conditions may at some point justify overturning Section 5. Does this mean that the Chief Justice believes that the Constitution is a living document? He thought he might mine that nugget out of that. And a very interesting one at that, too. We talked about the living document interpretation a little bit earlier in today's show. Does he believe that a law that is constitutional today might not be constitutional tomorrow, depending on the state of American society? That would be a surprise. It is not is this not the very same judicial argument that conservatives have consistently decried on principle for decades? How can it be used today by a conservative jurist in support of a conservative goal? And an excellent observation that was, David, way back in June of 2009. And, of course, the answer, you didn't know that the answer would be formulated this way so many years later on Kagro in the Morning radio program, but it's true. Gimmitarianism basically explains it. You know what? This principle needs to be interpreted this way today. It needs to be interpreted that way tomorrow in order for me to win in both situations, and I do not care. And is it hypocritical? You know what? Call it what you want, but instead, why don't we talk about the fact that I just ruled on this in your face, and it's all over, and I just won. I just said what the law was. And now you have to work backwards to try to undo it with, against my pretzel logic. At which point, next argument you make, I'll say, yeah, if I was consistent, I would do this. But I don't have to be consistent. You know what? Write it down. I'm inconsistent. Overruled by, and that's basically how it comes out. Of course, they don't overrule anything or shout overruled from the bench in the Supreme Court. But we'll mix our metaphors just for fun in the last couple minutes of the show. All right, let's see. A couple of other items that we want to put on the record. Of course, tomorrow and Friday will be busy days for squeezing in yet more stories and thinking about how we'll deal with the Thanksgiving break. So we'll see if we can't get some of these other additional there's a lot of great writing out there and a lot of interesting stories and weird dots and random items that we have to squeeze in. We'll see how many we get to before the end of the day. Yeah, all right. So I found the tweet that Armando had sent around was from Michael Grunwald, noting this change, and here's a little bit more explanation on what the Republicans had to do. House Republicans are ditching their rule, making it hard to hike people's taxes because they're about to hike people's taxes. Why make it hard, right? This, an entry from, I don't know, is that probably Politico? He's got a screen grab here. Clearing the path. The House Rules Committee is expected to waive a rule that had been put in place to make it difficult to increase taxes when it meets tonight at 6:30 p.m. I think that might have been yesterday. I don't know. Reports pro-taxes Colin Wilhelm. The waiver would prevent any attempt to block the House tax reform bill by raising a point of order over potential tax increases for certain individuals who may lose deductions they claim on their taxes. House Rule 21, by way of putting a name to it, requires 3/5 of House members to approve any tax increase. Though it's unclear whether that rule includes the elimination of deductions, that is, defines the elimination of deductions as a tax hike, and if Republicans wrote it, it probably did. Anyway, it's unclear whether that rule includes the elimination of deductions or the proposed lowering of the mortgage interest deductions. Republicans plan to waive the rule just to be safe. A majority vote in the House Rules Committee would be sufficient to grant that waiver. So just another rules change, temporarily as needed. The ultimate gimmitarian organ, of course, the House Rules Committee. Do both sides do it? Yes, they do. But do both sides make all their candidates sign pledges that they'll never do this? Grover Norquist is able to squeeze those out of every Republican, including every Republican that will vote to waive that rule on the House Rules Committee. That doesn't happen on the Democratic side. Just thought we'd point that one out. I guess there's another entry here that we should consider. I see two people who tweeted in very interesting ways about this observation. In the past couple of days, we've been dealing with the, I don't know what we could say, the sort of fitful, I guess there's fitful sleep going on among some liberals and leftists about whether or not there is sufficient contrition among Democratic voters and other left-leaning folks for having somehow excused, I guess, is the argument, Bill Clinton's habits in the area of sexual harassment and at least accusations of sexual assault as well. And so lots of, I guess, quote-unquote think pieces about, well, we have to confront this, we have to reevaluate this, and why weren't Democrats, why didn't they ever have their reckoning with this? And, you know, people like, among others, Armando pointing out, yeah, like, why didn't they do something serious about Bill Clinton, like spend $70 million investigating him and actually impeach the man and put it up to a vote, you know, that comes this close to removing the first president from office in history? Things we didn't end up doing with Andrew Johnson, things we didn't end up doing or even get the chance to try to do with Richard Nixon. Right? I mean, why wasn't there ever a reckoning other than that whole thing? Or, as others have pointed out, Dave Weigel, I think, pointing out to a similar observation yesterday, well, you know, move on, that major force in left-leaning Democratic politics, move on only exists because it was, you know, a movement that arose to, you know what, here's what we should do. Let's have that judgment. Let's censure the president and move on from there. I mean, I guess you could say, well, why weren't you for impeachment rather than censure? And I guess that's a question. But the idea that there was no accountability, no reckoning whatsoever, well, that's just plainly wrong. Also floating out there, Jonathan Chait and his tweet, I guess, about his piece in New York Magazine, the tweet asking, what would Democrats do if their majority hinged on a child molester? And I guess the implication here is, well, wouldn't they maybe possibly put things aside and simply say, you know, the stakes are too important here. We have to, you know, if our majority depended on, if we were going to lose the majority because we had somebody that needed to be expelled as a child molester, would we do it? And I guess it's a valid question. It's just that it's a question that has answers already. And one of the answers comes from, or is pointed out by, David Neer from Daily Kos, of course, who tweets characteristically oy vey. For starters, Dems, he reminds everybody, pushed Anthony Weiner out immediately, even though it wound up costing them a House seat at a very difficult time. Although it didn't, change the actual balance of power in terms of which party is in the majority and which is in the minority, but it was pretty razor thin, and they went ahead and did it anyway. And he goes on from there and offers another example. Take the Illinois lieutenant governor fiasco from 1986 as an even better example. Leave it to David Neer to remember things like this from 1986. Let's see. But here is a write-up, I guess somebody else who remembered it as well, from St. Louis Today. Is that where it's from? Trump nomination could reprise Illinois electoral confusion of 1986. That's the headline, and the description here says it was an odd election year when the Democratic Party nominee for governor got less than 7% of the vote. What are we talking about here? He begins to explain it, David does. A Lyndon LaRouche acolyte somehow won the lieutenant governor nod in Illinois, and Adlai Stevenson III, the gubernatorial nominee, would have been forced to run on a ticket with him. Stevenson refused to even be part of this ticket, but his only way out was to abandon the Democratic nomination and form a new party, which he did and called Solidarity, by the way. Standing on principle, David points out, killed the Dems in the Illinois governor race that year. And you can take a look at the results online by clicking the link he includes in his tweet. The Republican incumbent, James Thompson, had beaten Stevenson by 0.1% of the vote 4 years earlier. This was an extremely winnable rematch, but this wasn't even about voting for a LaRouche. Stevenson, not about him, well, will I support my own lieutenant governor candidate? It wasn't about that. Stevenson wouldn't even appear on the ballot with him. He sacrificed everything for that principle, and rightly so. So if the hypothetical is what would Dems do if faced with a totally unacceptable nominee of their own, we know the answer. They disavow him. Pretty good answer. And there was another one just like it offered up by, let's see if we can pull it up here, Jeff Feck, who says, in Minnesota, Dems are now 1 vote short of taking the state Senate. They just told the state senator in a swing district to quit over harassment allegations. So that's pretty serious, too. Once again, now currently facing pretty much exactly the same kind of situation. And they say the majority is in the offing here, but we're not going to take it by leaving this incumbent in place and rolling the dice. We're going to roll the dice on somebody new. And that's okay because we stand on principle in this case. So 2 very good examples. I'm sure there's a countervailing example somewhere out there, but just by way of preparing yourself for any discussion on it, I thought I would add those 2 things into the mix. And by the way, I guess a closing comment or two just to connect it to another issue we have discussed here in the past as we roll out the outro music and get ready for wrapping up another successful-ish Kagro in the Morning show. All of these places where we are this close to retaking the majority in one or both of the state legislatures, these places where we've flipped them, these places where we have narrowed the gap, or either to a razor-thin majority or even a 50-50 split. Remember at the beginning of the year, the brief spate of panic over the number of state legislatures and trifectas, as it were, including the gubernatorial seat, that had been captured and secured by Republicans along the way, and that they were 1 state or so away from the otherwise what used to be a pipe dream of calling a constitutional convention and or adopting constitutional amendments in enough state legislatures to pass muster. And they were just 1 state away. And, I hope we've turned that tide back. We have not made enormous strides, but it's no longer a 1 state margin anymore. And that's one of the big and most important results that I don't think I have seen commented on in this last round of elections. We need to keep that trend going, of course, and we'll be working hard to do that as best we can here and on Daily Kos every day.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thanks for listening along, and we'll have today, following the show, Alex Wise of Sea Change Radio interviewing Joel Solomon on the dirt on clean money, followed by a mix of environmental, labor, and world news. Always good and relevant programming here on Netroots Radio, and we look forward to Justice's new program on Monday.